examples. This is London Weekend Television broadcasting from the South Bank. Now we join ITN for the news at 9:33.
The Ulster kidnaps, tense negotiations as the deadline approaches. Exiles in London plot to take over the Seychelles. Princess Anne makes her controversial visit to South Africa. And a quiet run out on a Sunday in New York. Good evening. Delicate negotiations are going on in Northern Ireland tonight to try to free 2 kidnap victims held by terrorist groups. A Protestant group have said they'll kill Mr. Joseph Donegan, a Catholic father of 7, in 2.5 hours if the IRA don't release the UDR man they seized on Friday. The IRA have appealed for more time. They say they can't contact their men to arrange the release of Sergeant Thomas Cochrane, the UDR man, because of the large numbers of soldiers and police in South Armagh, where they kidnapped him. The Nobel Peace Prize winner Mairead Corrigan is thought to be helping in the negotiations to extend the deadline. The 2 families of the kidnapped victims are expected to make a joint appeal for their release very shortly. The Donegan family have been told the IRA are going to release Sergeant Cochrane. I asked the daughter of Mr. Donegan how the negotiations were going.
We had a contact, a Sinn Féin contact for the IRA saying that they needed an extension of the midnight deadline because the army and police presence has not been withdrawn, so they can contact their men to release Mr. Cochrane.
What are the remaining obstacles then, as far as you can see it?
As far as I can see, it's whether or not the loyalist group who are holding my daddy are prepared to extend the deadline. And also, I think it was very much up to the police and army to withdraw.
Why do you say that?
They have said all along they are concerned about both lives. And I mean, if the IRA are prepared to release Mr. Cochrane, but they need space to do so, I don't see why the police and army can't give them that space.
The Northern Ireland Secretary, Mr. Pryor, has admitted that his plans for the return of Home Rule to Ulster are dead. Mr. Pryor, interviewed on London Weekend Television's Weekend World programme, said there was no question of giving power back to Stormont without Catholic support. And the Catholic parties, the SDLP and Sinn Féin, have said they won't be taking the seats they won in the Assembly election. Brian Walden asked Mr. Pryor whether the new Assembly was worth setting up without their support.
I think the Assembly can work in its limited form.
Without the Catholics?
Without the Catholics, although it won't work anything like so well as it would do if the Catholics were there, if the SDLP were there. That's quite clear. But I think the Assembly can work. It has useful work to do, particularly the committees of the Assembly have useful work to do. So we get on with the Assembly and we set out to show how important the Assembly is, and thereby, I would hope, make people and encourage people to see that it has a very useful role to perform.
Do you intend to try and get Sinn Féin involved in the Assembly or in the work of the Assembly?
They have made it clear that they're not interested in the Assembly, that they're not interested in constitutional government in Northern Ireland. And until they show that they are prepared to talk, first of all, about the Assembly and about constitutional government in Northern Ireland, I see no reason why I should see them.
Scotland Yard are tonight investigating reports that a planned coup in the Seychelles Islands has been organised by a group of exiles in London. The reports appeared in the Sunday Times newspaper, which has passed on to ITN tapes of phone conversations in which the exiles appear to be arranging a military operation. One of the men involved admitted to ITN today that his group does want to bring down the Seychelles government. The Seychelles, a small but strategically important group of islands in the Indian Ocean, have recently been the scene of a number of coup and counter-coup attempts.
The islands became a tropical playboy paradise under the flamboyant control of former President James Mansham. But life for the people changed suddenly when Mansham, seen here on the left, lost power 5 years ago. His fatal mistake had been to make Albert René his Prime Minister. Less than a year after they shook hands, René seized power. The new president set out to destroy what he called the evil of tourism and created a radical African state. But his socialist regime has been a target for counter-groups. Last year, an attempted coup by a group of mercenaries ended in disaster after a shootout at the airport. It had been led by Major Mike Hoare, who got a 10-year jail sentence in South Africa. 4 of his men were sentenced to death on treason charges. Opponents of President René say they hired the men. Today there are allegations that a London hotel was used by 3 men planning another coup. They met in room 412 at the Carlton Tower, but it was bugged by persons unknown. The Sunday Times was tipped off and they monitored the conversations on transistor radios. An exile, Gerard Warrow, is said to have been involved along with 2 others. One of them is Paul Chow, who'd been a newsagent on the islands. And the third man is said to be Edmund Camille, a former First Secretary at the Seychelles High Commission in London. We were not allowed inside room 412, and officers from the anti-terrorist squad who are making inquiries today wouldn't come out and talk to us. Meanwhile, the hotel, which boasts to have its own special security service to ensure complete privacy for its wealthy guests, can't explain how sophisticated bugging devices slipped through their security screen. Tapes recorded by the Sunday Times indicate that plans were in progress. An unknown contact did most of the talking.
Yes, you know, so the arrangement is still on, you know, I mean, the deal is still on as he told us, you see.
Okay. Well, let me give you some points to consider. Have you got a piece of pencil?
Yes, I have.
Paper and pencil?
Yes.
All right. Number 1, there's quite a bit of activity here from our authorities. So it means that we're going to have to plan things very, very, very carefully. Please make a determined effort to get that clothing of the same color as the people, as your army wears there.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I'll send my boys to get it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good.
They must get some big sizes, eh?
Which means sizes to suit a king, eh?
Right.
Okay, yes, all right.
Okay, my friend.
Tonight, one of the men involved, who's been seen by Scotland Yard, admitted he knew about attempts to destabilise the Rene government, but said they hadn't broken the law over here.
I feel we're being accused of breaking the laws of this country, which we deny categorically. Certain allegations have been made against us to the effect that we have brought explosives or guns or whatever in this country. We deny that. In fact, we are going to see the end of this. But I think it's very disgraceful for people to make allegations of this nature.
But are you plotting to overthrow the Rene government?
The question of the word plotting is, of course, has wide meanings. We are a creation of Mr. Rene. Therefore, our existence, the mere fact that we exist, means we're plotting against him.
The former president, James Mansham, who was at home in London today, said he hadn't been directly involved in any new attempted coup, but he supports the freedom movement.
I'm in touch with all exile groups. We were a small community. We were like a little family. So naturally everybody comes and we all get in touch.
Would you support what these men are alleged to have been involved in?
Well, I'll give them my blessing, moral blessing, to the achievement of the restoration of democracy, so long as they respect the law of the country they are in.
In the Seychelles, President Rene will take little comfort from all this, for while the London end may have been blown, there is no doubt that there are still those as determined as ever to topple his government.
The Americans are reported to be pressing the British government for full details of what's described as potentially one of the most damaging Soviet penetrations of Western intelligence since the war. It's said to involve a leak from the network of secret Western monitoring stations, which includes the government communications headquarters at Cheltenham. According to an article in the New York Times, the American security services believe that intelligence material has been fed back to the Russians over a number of years. And new details are emerging about the help the United States gave to Britain during the Falklands conflict. Defense sources in Washington say the Pentagon supplied substantial amounts of arms to Britain, including Shrike anti-radar missiles used successfully from Harrier jets, Stinger anti-aircraft missiles used by the SAS to destroy at least one Argentine aircraft, and Harpoon and Sidewinder missiles designed to boost depleted NATO stocks. 3 men are feared dead after an accident on a North Sea oil rig 80 miles off Aberdeen. The men plunged into the sea after a walkway on Occidental Oil's Piper Alpha platform collapsed. 1 body has been recovered. The search goes on for the other 2. Princess Anne has arrived in Swaziland on the first leg of her Southern African tour, where she's been greeted by Queen Zaliwe, known to her people as the Great She-Elephant. But the trip has caused a row because the princess stopped off at Johannesburg Airport on her way there. The Foreign Office said it was the only way she could make the airline connection.
It was a 90-minute stopover hailed by the right-wing South African press as a full-blooded diplomatic visit. And the British Embassy, on orders from London, were at pains to dispel this illusion. The reception committee was limited to the British ambassador and his wife and a single South African civil servant. But hundreds of South Africans were at the airport for what was a rare glimpse of royalty. Princess Anne, who is president of the International Save the Children Fund, spent an hour with its representatives discussing fundraising activities. At no time did she leave the VIP area. South African photographers were clearly uncertain how to address royalty.
Lady, Princess.
Princess Anne left for Swaziland amid tight security aboard an Andover of the royal flight. Last Thursday, its crew were held at gunpoint by soldiers in eastern Zimbabwe while on a reconnaissance flight. Her tour of Zimbabwe, which begins on Wednesday, has now been altered.
It's United Nations Peace Day, and hundreds of thousands of people have been demonstrating around the world against nuclear weapons. In Japan, nearly 500,000 people lay down in the centre of Osaka. In London, 2,000 protesters pushed several hundred babies to Downing Street as part of a Babies Against the Bomb campaign. They handed in a petition calling on the government to abandon all nuclear weapons. And in Stockholm, more than 25,000 demonstrators linked hands to form a human peace chain more than 4 miles long. It stretched from the American embassy to the Russian embassy. They said they were building a bridge for peace, and they braved the rain to sing anti-nuclear songs. The American Alberto Salazar has won the New York Marathon for the 3rd year in a row. Salazar crossed the line after 2 hours, 9 minutes and 29 seconds, just over a minute outside his own record. Norway's Grete Waitz won the women's race for the 4th time. 16,000 people started the marathon, setting out over the bridge from Staten Island. They ran through Queens and Brooklyn and on to the Bronx before finishing in Central Park. More than 2 million people turned out to watch. That's all from us. Bye-bye for now.
Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this son of York.
I thought, I've got to make this fellow look absolutely hateful.
If you're wise, you take the part off with your maker.
That's part 2 of Laurence Olivier, A Life, tonight at 10:15 on ITV.